the YouTube, Facebook live here, so I'm gonna be like my vantage point will be moving during this. But I'll talk a little bit and then we'll do questions. These classes used to be longer, but because it's 11 p.m. here in Thailand for this particular time slot, I have to keep it at an hour. Um, there were a couple people on the Wednesday class that like are new and that I hadn't given meditation instruction to before, but it only looks like one of them's here. Kathy. Okay. So for everyone who's new who hasn't been in a class where like I give the basics of meditation, you find them in two videos on the YouTube channel. It's called Three Mode Awareness. The first one's called Three Mode Awareness. So it explains how attention is directed in the varieties of meditation practices. For example, all techniques that use objects like the breath or awareness of the body, I classify all of those as mode 1. And all self-inquiry practices, which are meditation techniques or approaches where you're directing the attention at awareness itself, I call those mode 2. And mode 3 is when the direction of attention is abandoned completely. So mode 3 is also called non-meditation. You're just not attempting to do anything anymore. So the general idea around this is for mode 3 to not just be like flurrying around and narratives and stories and distractions, you have to get over something called the 5 hindrances. So in Theravada Buddhism, these are the classic distractions or obstacles in meditation. So the reason that your mind is wandering and that it's not able to rest in presence, or you have the sense of being overwhelmed, is because the factors which act as a cause or act as condition for the mind wandering are present. So those factors may be feelings of restlessness or unsettledness, the experience of drowsiness, or a lack of clarity in the mind. Irritation, that could be another thing. Boredom, annoyance. So there's a variety, there's a whole slew of mental phenomena that are the reason meditation is difficult, or they're the reason that persistent presence is not a regular occurrence. So in your standard in your practice, the idea is that every day when you sit, I recommend sitting for long enough to at least begin to experience the alleviation of the 5 hindrances, or the alleviation of the meditation obstacles. That generally takes about 40 minutes. Oh, sorry. Let me. Okay, I think we're good now. All right. Yeah. So in a given meditation sit, you'll notice, like if we look at an hour, you'll notice that there's a life cycle to the hour-long meditation. So it's different for each person, but this is an example of it. The first 10 minutes, you notice that your attention and your mindfulness is pretty crisp. It's staying with the object it's not having any issues. And, your relaxation is setting in. And you might find that you start to slip into drowsiness after the 15-minute period, or the stream of your thoughts begins to cause some kind of irritation. So there's something that comes up in your internal experience that um, acts as a reason or acts as a condition for some kind of irritation, annoyance, or boredom. When that happens, you're now dealing with the hindrance. So now you're like, oh God, this is a really long hour. Time is passing very slow. So this is an example of suffering from the boredom hindrance, or boredom being lumped in with one of the major five. So you sit, you endure. You keep bringing your mind back to being aware. You keep noticing, and then eventually, around the 40-minute mark or the 45-minute mark, you notice like, oh, okay, I'm meditating now. Like this is meditation. Something clicks around the 40 to 45-minute mark for in many instances, in many cases. And then you have the experience that the sit has actually begun. So at that point, the mind may experience calm, but you find that it's that like right when it starts to get still and quiet and consistent, boom, the hour ends, right? So like right at the point that it's starting to get timeless, then the clock goes. This is a common experience. I'm sure most of us have had it at least at some point. So what I recommend, I mean, this is a question um, I get a lot. Like, what's the most important thing I can do for awakening? Like, if I'm interested in this thing called awakening and non-duality, what's the most important thing I could do? And I'd say it's meditate meditate a full hour every day in the morning or in the evening. If you want to do 30 minutes just to build the habit, that's good. But if you meditate a full hour every day for a month, you will be shocked at what happens. So, um, of course, this is only the case if you're not meditating regularly, right? Then you'll notice a significant change. But if you are already meditating regularly, then some of the things that you'd want to look at if you're not, um, quote, getting results or noticing any significant shifts is the content or what is happening in those hours. So if you meditate every day, this is a funny story, interesting story. So I met a monk. Um, I usually don't like. I prefer not to share stories like this about monks, but it's important. So and it's a little funny too. So he kept a log of all of his meditation hours, and this is a pretty extensive log. This is like a good 2,000 hours of meditation. And but every time we would sit, he would just sleep the whole time. Just sleep for just sleep for 3 hours straight. So I get it if sleepiness is a hindrance for you and you're like working with it, right? But I mean, there's a difference between you can tell the person's working with it and like he or she literally just sleeps every session. I mean, these are two very different things. So yeah, so just 2,000 hours of sleep. That will not work. Yeah. If your hour of meditation is sleep or is thinking about politics or is ruminating on this and ruminating on that and having these conversations with people that don't exist anymore in your life, it's uh there's training that needs to be done in that area. So it's one thing if you're being attentive and you're noticing and you're really orienting yourself towards that, and this stuff comes up, versus um, permitting yourself to just like tumble along in stories and narratives. So the reason, if specific shifts or results aren't happening or aren't maturing, what we always look at is methodology. So what are we doing in the sits? What is happening in the sits? What's the state of the mind before the sit, going into the sit, during the sit, after the sit? So yeah, because it's common in non-duality to just kind of like have the view that there's like nothing you can do about this, and this like totally out of your hands, and whatever is gonna happen is gonna happen. Okay, I mean that's convenient and it works for the non-dual teachers that had spontaneous awakenings. But for the people like me that struggled for 5,000 hours, I'm able to tell you that that's not the case. Like, there are things that work. Yeah. Um, in terms of persistent or permanent shifts, there are things that are more effective than others, for sure. So, for example, all the like 70% or something of um, shifts into non-duality actually happen from inquiry practices. So that kind of the sense that awareness is separate from its objects, and then suddenly one moment it's not, right? That's a pretty big shift. So the the popping of that bubble of that separation between knower and known most commonly occurs with self-inquiry. So it most commonly occurs with mode 2 practices where you're looking at subjectivity itself. You're looking at, or you're noticing awareness, getting clear on what awareness is. We can do this in the next class. We can do like we'll do a circle thing where we just describe awareness. It could be a one word, two word, a phrase, or whatever. But it helps us, particularly the new people, or if this isn't clear yet, it helps you get clear on differentiating between um, consciousness or between awareness and the contents of experience. So this is an initial distinction that's very important in the career of the meditator, because most of our lives and most of our conventional existence has to do with content. It has to do with the contents of the mind as opposed to the nature of the mind. It has to do with the objects of awareness as opposed to that which is perceiving those objects. This is really the point of self-inquiry, any mode 2 practice. It's to begin to notice more this awareness or this noticer, and to do this consistently. Another important thing to take to consider too is for example, let's say we're meditating and we have this like just fractional glimpse of non-duality or of like deepening in the meditation. Maybe our mind gets really still or something. Um, we have to use discernment, or we have to notice the details as to what happened before, during, and after. So in Theravada practice, this is called review. It's called review and investigation. So, and it's not for the purpose of like getting, really crazy about trying to produce or recreate certain states, but it's just to begin to see, what more of what is actually happening um, in these glimpses, in these deepenings, or when the mind becomes quiet. For example, have you noticed, or is it noticeable that if you eat a big meal, your meditation is either better or worse after the fact? What is going on with this? Sorry, was that me or someone else? Okay, forget it. All right. Yeah, you want to look at the nexus of conditions or factors when it comes to um, what happens in a sit. So if I eat a big meal, does that mean the clarity of mind is more refined in the meditation, or does it mean I will be suffering from sleepiness? For some of you, it's actually, the big meal helps, but for others like myself, it just puts you to sleep. Like if I eat, I have to wait an hour or something at least before I attempt to meditate. So whether you're eating or whether you're walking or meditating or doing anything, um, relaxing and noticing and remaining in presence, that's always the foundation. But like committed specific practice, you want to look at what is conducive and what is unconducive, what is useful and what is unuseful in regards to that sit or what will happen in that sit. So yeah, the main a thing to consider too also is like begin to see how the mind actually works. So when we begin to look at our subjective experience or when we begin to investigate the nature of mind, we can begin, if we remember to do this, we can begin to see how the mind actually engages with content, or how the mind clings to certain things, how it reacts to certain things. It craves particular things while it's averse to other things. But one of the very uh, important things to see and to begin to look at specifically is how the mind wanders. So this is the thing. In meditation, you're aware, you're aware, you're aware, and then you're not. And then you're spontaneously aware again, and then you're aware, you're aware, 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 and then you're not. And then this just happens throughout the duration of the sit and then during your day as well. But the arising of unawareness is an actual point of investigation in your practice. It's definitely something to look at and to begin to notice what is it exactly that captures your attention most. Is it a specific obstacle, a specific problem, a specific pattern? Once you see that your thoughts may be wandering to the same set of memories or the same set of thoughts, the same particular patterns, then you can take those patterns as your meditation object, as something to work with shadow work or whatever, and begin to look at that. And when you deal with that, you find that your mind begins to wander to it less, or it just doesn't have an impetus to do so anymore. So there was a student here that I gave him the specific instruction to look at this. Um, yeah, as much as possible, notice the arising of unawareness. So the interesting thing about about unawareness is that it's like falling asleep. You don't actually see that moment. You don't see the moment you fall asleep. You just wake up in the morning and there's like the last thing you remember. That's how it works. So with the wandering of mind or the wandering of attention, you don't actually see the wandering. You only recall it in hindsight. So once your awareness or your mindfulness returns again, then you may remember the last thing you thought about, or the last moment you were with the meditation object, or the last moment that you were in awareness or present. And then boom, unawareness, and then awareness returns, you recall. So I instructed him to specifically look at the moment of unawareness. And the approach was to um, I have to be careful about like what specific advice I give to people, right? If I tell one person to do something that's not suitable for them, it just gives them a headache and it makes things difficult. But this guy was the entrepreneur, so he knows how to focus. So I told him, like a cat, like a cat waiting for an animal to come out of a hole, I want you to look and direct your attention at the moment that unawareness arises. And he did that for 2 days, and then he entered spontaneous samadhi, where his mind didn't wander for like an entire 24-hour period. And then he said he experienced for the first time yogic sleep. So like he closed his eyes and bang, it was the morning. So, like, just shut your eyes and open them, and 8 hours have passed. So when you look at specific areas of the experiential field, magic can happen. It's just its own particular process to figure out where to look for you. So, because I know another guy that had a awakening open by looking at specifically the stream of forethought that occurs or that precedes every action. So this is something that we don't notice, but you can start to notice it. This is something you can begin to notice, for the next like 5 minutes. Notice how like when your mind makes contact with an object that you want, or when you see an object that you want. So like let's say theoretically someone just walked in here and like put pancakes on that table. I love pancakes, by the way. So pancakes are on the table now. I'm smelling pancakes. I see pancakes. The pancakes make contact with my eye. As soon as the pancakes and the smell makes contact with my senses, there's actually a very fast image, or like fantasy, essentially. You could call it like a proto dimension that appears instantaneously of me getting up and reaching for that pancake. So as soon as contact arises, there's another form of contact in the form of an automatic thought or an automatic fantasy. Boom. That pops up in the mind, um, with the fantasy, and now with the smell. Like there's a desire that arises, and then there's the actual exercising of volition and intention to get me up out of this chair and over there to the pancake. So this like phantom stream of proto dimensions, or mental fantasies, is happening all the time. It's just not noticed. So another example is the actual stream of thought. So the stream of thought, which is always flowing, is not something we usually pay attention to. We may pay attention to internal dialogue occasionally, but for the most part, we're dealing with objects in space. So what you need to do over there, what you need to do here, whatever, your job or whatever it is. A lot of our experience is more tactile and more related to actions and the external senses. But there's actually this uh, stream of mental pictures that is arising all the time. So this is another object of inquiry, or another object of investigation. Every aspect of the experiential field can be investigated, either just to learn how it works or what it really is in your subjectivity, or as gates to awakening. So I'll give you an example of noticing the stream of thought, just the stream of mental pictures and dialogue. One thing you may notice if you were to do this kind of investigation is that the more you notice what you're thinking, the less your mind wanders. because your thoughts are the primary source of mind wandering. Like the thing that takes you, for the most part, out of the present moment, at least in my case, is thought. So like you're here, you're aware, you're aware. What happens in the moment that unawareness arises? For the most part, it's some it's a particular thought. Yeah, like a dog could bark or some sound, some abrupt sound can capture your attention, but in a lot of cases, it's just what you're thinking. It's um, the arising of thought is able to redirect attention from from the present moment into that particular stream or that particular image. So, but when you begin to notice this like stream of what you're thinking more and more, like let's say you do this for a week, or you decide, hey, okay, you know what, I'm gonna notice my thoughts as much as I can for the next week. So if you do that, you'll be surprised at well, at what you find. What is happening here? Um, Sorry, someone's screen sharing. I gotta stop this. Someone's seeing the screen share.
Yes, big white screen.
Yeah.
Just it's a luminous object, Ryan. Yeah,
it's the it's the ultimate nature. It's the ultimate nature right here.
I didn't think it was going to have such straight lines.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can't determine who's screen sharing. This is the problem.
I think it's the iPhone that had your last name, wasn't it? It popped up on the screen really quick when the screen shared. It's an iPhone, Ryan, that says.
Oh, okay. I got it. But I don't know how to end their screen share. Meeting settings.
Higher self, Ryan. It's pretty interesting the way this stuff works.
I have to what? Oh, higher self.
Higher self.
It's the monad, the white pearl. You know. Jeez. Host tools. Share screen. Okay, that should have ended it. Yeah. All right. It's done now, right?
You're back in form, Ryan. You're back in form.
Okay. All right. I'm back from the unconditioned, So, okay, so where was I? So let's say you just okay. How about let's just make it official? Your homework for the next week is to just, as much as you can during the day, like whatever your meditation practice is, you can keep it, but I'm saying outside meditation. Just notice specifically the stream of thought. And as often as you can. So just notice the mental pictures and notice the internal dialogue and just watch it. And do this till our next class. Yeah, because since thought is the main, one of the primary causes for the lapsing of attention and the wandering of mind, you're essentially taking the cause of the wandering as the meditation object. So it's important for that reason, but it's also important because you'll begin to see the repetitive nature of what you think whether it's mental pictures or dialogue. And when you see something repetitive enough, or you see something clearly enough times, um, you stop taking it so seriously. I mean, that's the big thing. Like, awakening comes with all these side effects, right? It comes with superpowers and whatever. There's all these stages and states that people, including myself, describe. But the essence of awakening is freedom. So if you wanna, if you were to ask yourself, I get this question: where am I? Like, where am I in the stages? It's not even a question I like to answer. The marker is the degree of freedom that is now the case, or that may be now the case. So, for example, um, people provide different metrics, right? Like Eckhart Tolle's metric is peace. Like, I think someone asked him in Power of Now, what's the sign that you're progressing, and he's like, peace. Peace is the sign. And so there are these big like meta themes, peace, freedom, release, right? But I think uh, freedom captures it more than anything. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be freedom from yourself, or freedom from your thinking. All of that can still be there, but it's just that the glue which the thinking mind or the conceptual mind has, the hold that it has on your spirit. I never used that word before, but the hold that it has on your nature. Um, yeah, the whole point of the meditation practices and of studying and learning this, and being undergoing this whole particular process, is for that to come undone, for that hold that the conventional world and the conventional mind has on you, on your nature. Yeah, so with observing the stream of thought, or observing the um, taking that as object in meditation. This is a practice called thought witnessing, or witnessing thoughts. It's actually not that common, surprisingly. Surprisingly, the thing that is at cause for most mind wandering is not considered a meditation object. Meditation objects are always the body, the breath, awareness. But the stream of thought itself as object, as what it is that you're witnessing, is less common. But my experiments with it have found that since it's the main cause of wandering, it's a very powerful practice. It's just that the main obstacle is boredom. You're like, what am I going to do? Just sit here and think all day, right? But the idea is that by observing the stream of thought, and by uh, noticing its dynamics, essentially, you become free from the hold that the stream of thought has on you. It's like our thoughts have this automatic, um, or they have a granted sense of realness, and we're subject to that realness, um, of those thoughts, of those images. But what happens? There's a phrase in Mahayana Buddhism, or specifically from the Heart Sutra, the emptying of the five aggregates, right? The emptying, form is emptiness, feeling is emptiness, right? So it describes what those things are in terms of their nature, but there's also a process of the aggregates becoming emptied. So that means the sense of solidity, the sense of realness, the capacity for the constituents of experience to cause suffering, that gets emptied. So the sense that, the body is you, that you are this body, that is a misperception that gets emptied. So the stream of thought, um, being a major source of identification for most of us, taking a position of witnessing that empties it. When you're witnessing something, you're making it an object of awareness. That's the application of wisdom to that object. It's similar to like any, I don't know, there's probably some engineers in here or people that worked on a very difficult problem for a very long time. So you notice how like when you keep your attention on something, it actually unfolds. Like if you just keep your eye on a specific problem or on a specific challenge, on a specific area of your life, that attention will allow that thing to unfold. It'll allow the knowledge and the wisdom to emerge from it. Yeah. And that applies to many things. Like in many systems, they talk about the chakras and the energy centers. How do they become opened? Oh, they become open by placing your attention on them. How do you open the brow center? You place your attention on the brow center for a couple 100 hours, and then all this phenomena um, begins to open up. So it's the same thing. Place your attention and your noticing on the stream of thought, and inevitably you'll notice a distance or a gap. Or I don't want to condition your experience, but just do it for 7 days, and we can discuss it next week. So yeah, as much as you can, just begin to be aware of what you're thinking. It's like, yeah, well, I'm already aware of what I'm thinking, but I mean moment to moment aware. Yeah. So when you sit down and you have your breakfast or your lunch or whatever, usually we have this like general awareness of the thoughts that we have, but we're not like being particularly meticulous about it. I mean, I want you to be more refined and precise and just observe in a way that you don't usually. If your normal level of thought awareness and you know noticing what you're thinking is here, I just want you to take it like a notch down of refinement, or not one level deeper of refinement, to begin to be more attentive. And yeah, one of the things you might notice right off the bat is, wow, I actually think the same stuff every day. Like, isn't that crazy? I'm like a tape loop, you know? So it's important insight to see that, to see the automatic nature, and then to begin to see that the induction of presence, the induction of witnessing into the system, into your reality, is not an automatic thing. Like it is a new thing that you're doing the next 7 days if you decide to actually give this a shot. So yeah, to begin to see the stream of mental pictures and hear the stream of inner dialogue. Both of these are happening simultaneously, or one may you may have more of one and less of the other. So in my case, for example, I find that I only talk to myself when my mind wanders. So that means if I'm aware, there's no internal dialogue at all. The talking only happens if um, my mind wanders into a thought, or some kind of something in the sense fields captures my attention. Then there'll be some talking, and the talking is usually like commenting about what is being seen, strangely enough. Yeah, it's not for the most part, it's not actually like substantial dialogue. It's like minds wandering. Oh, the trees are really green today, you know. Oh, isn't that nice? Oh, it's a nice stream of water. Hmm. Yeah, I have a call in like 30 minutes. It's stuff like that, you know. So, so my stream of thought, um, compared to the stream of thought I had like 10 years ago is is the difference is like unbelievable, you know. So by beginning to direct your noticing at this, yeah, one, more presence ensues, so more mindfulness is the result. And then two, I mean, you really just are learning quite a bit about how your mind works, what your fixations are. And when you begin to see so many times the process of fixation, the process of how of the mind clinging or holding on to certain things or certain patterns, when you see that enough times and you see it clearly enough, there's really the possibility of the mind dropping that thing. So, for example, we may have had like a repetitive pattern or a repetitive thought for like, many years or decades. It's like, why am I still thinking about this crap? Like I'm already 30 or 40 or whatever, and it's the same thing. Like there may still be this thought of like, no matter what, it's not good enough, or no matter what, it's not enough, or there's this like inescapable sense of failure. But we're always experiencing that thought or that particular simulation um, in like the resultant phase. We're already having a reaction when we're thinking that stuff. When those thoughts are being had, I'm a failure. You're really saying that to yourself. You're already reacting. So when you're doing it from this place of observing the thought stream and you're seeing that narrative pop up, it's totally different than all the times you've been subject to that particular thought or that particular narrative. So don't think they're the same thing. Yeah, don't think just because you've suffered from these particular patterns your whole life that you've really seen deeply into them or looked at them for a long time. For example, the feeling of being a failure. Have you looked at and felt that feeling for 100 hours? Suffering from it for 100 hours is not the same thing as observing it for 100 hours. Feeling like crap for 100 hours or 100 years is not the same thing as viscerally noticing the energetic fabric of that pattern. These are like really far apart, these two things. To notice the fabric of a pattern and to see that fabric and to see its machinations is what will free you from it. Right? You look at something for 50 hours, or you look at something for 25 hours, or you look at something for 5 hours. It doesn't matter. You just look at something for long enough. You put your attention on something for long enough. Why do I do this? Like what's at the root of this feeling? And you'll notice how like it's so weird, this whole awakening thing and this whole reality thing, so mysterious. It's like when you look in certain places, it's almost like your system doesn't want you to look there. I don't know if any of you have noticed that as well. Like when you look in certain areas of the dark or in certain areas of the shadow, it's almost like reality or life or your mind arranges things for you to just like not go there. It's like subtly distracts you and like something else comes up and you're like, oh yeah, I was working on that for a while and I don't really know what happened, like why I stopped. So there's these elusive natures to these things. Yeah, David just said that's ego. There's um there's not to sound like superstitious or anything, but like, yeah, there really are parts of your psyche or parts of yourself that don't want to be looked at. So they're able to actually create these effects of diversion and forgetfulness, so that they don't get looked at. It's think of it in terms of, if something's persistent and unhealed, um, it has its own gravity. Like, it has its own place in the fabric of your psyche. So when you attempt to change that, you're like messing with the structure, and the structures itself, um, the structures themselves don't like that. They're like, no, 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 no. I don't think I should let this go. Yeah. Like, every other part of you knows you should let it go. But there's just this little part that's like, no, screw that. I have every right to be mad at this guy. Like, I have every right to be mad at my father or my mother or my sister or my brother or whatever. I have every right. Um, that, yeah, like uh, that little piece, like, if you're noticing, that your mind is going to resentment, or it often goes to resentment. Um, that's the thing to look at. Whatever the obstacle is the thing to look at, is the thing to study. If you find that in your thought stream experiment, in your thought observation experiment, that your mind wanders to a particular aversion, that's the thing to look at. When I think of this person, or when I think of this situation, and I feel so much repulsion, so much disgust, what is that really about? What is that really about? Find out what it's really about and see. What's very useful in this process of awakening is working with the relative challenges within the um, within the view of awakening itself, or within the immediacy of reality itself. To many of you personally and in class, I've said many times, irrespective of what you do, reality is neither increasing nor decreasing. It's always imminent. It's always present. It's always uninterrupted. And when that becomes the, like, modus operandi of your system, there's a huge amount of freedom that comes with that. The issue is that the reason it's not able to become the like operating system for your consciousness is because, for many of us, there are these, like, little viruses, essentially. There's these little viruses and structures that hold our ego in place, that hold our sense of self in place, that are in the way of the larger consciousness operating system. The reason we can't awaken to reality is because there are many patterns and parts of us that are just asleep. If the main thing that's taking you out of presence is resentment, but for some reason that resentment's not getting looked at, then uh, that's the obvious condition that is obstructing the recognition of this immediacy, and the identification with it, and then later the just falling away of identification completely. So it's a thing to consider too, that the spiritual teachers, the configuration of a spiritual teacher is different than, like, than most practitioners. So you'll notice that most spiritual teachers, they have, like, dark night stories. They have very intense stories. So that's part of how the matrix is configured, so that the teachings can actually reach more people. But to consider the unfolding of the teacher to be something that is expectant of the student, I think is a mistake. A lot of non-dual teachers really did not do much meditation practice. It's just the truth. Like, basically, they just got lucky. So, so if it's the case for many of the teachers that you know, this thing, the awakening just happened to them, and that there wasn't much to process, and that there wasn't much personality stuff to work through, or that they're not particularly, concerned or moved with any unwholesome personality traits that they have. Like, that may work for them because they're the teacher that got lucky, but that doesn't work for us. And it didn't work for me. Yeah, like, just serving my teacher every day for 2 years did not do anything. Yeah. Well, it may have. I mean, we don't know, but but the results were not as immediate as doing inquiry for 100 hours. You know, looking at awareness for 100 hours, like 2 hours a day for 50 days. I mean, that's more meditation than some people do in a lifetime. Really, because the meditation, many of us, we've been meditating for 15 years or 20 years or 30 years. But the thing to look at is not that spirituality or non-duality or meditation has had like how it's been a thing of interest in our lives. The fact that it's a thing of interest doesn't translate to what I'm talking about. The fact that I've been a seeker for 15 years, and that I learned from so many teachers, that I study from so many people, that doesn't translate necessarily to the visceral shift into awakening. Why? Because in how many of those hours that I was reading, listening, studying, following, how many hours did I actually look at awareness? How many hours? How many moments was I actually looking at what I am, as opposed to listening to other people talk about what I am? These are the differences. Like I mentioned earlier, methodology. Yeah. I fortunately had the circumstances and the instability in life and repeated failures and not being able to make anything work, um, that gave me the container to look at my mind for extended periods of time over many years. And when I looked at my mind for long enough, when I looked at it often enough, um, yeah, gradually the immediacy, or gradually the absolute, became ascertained, or became known, became. I always heard for so many years, it's like, oh yeah, this is it. This is it. It's your nature. The nature of your mind has no beginning, has no end, doesn't arise. I heard all of this stuff, right? But I had to look and see and notice enough for that understanding to become clear. When I first met Namkai Norbu Rinpoche, it was a very simple conversation. I just asked him, how do I realize the nature of mind? And he looked at me, like looked into my soul, for 2 minutes. Like, just staring at me for 2 minutes. Didn't say anything. Just stared at me. And then he just said, "How do you feel?" I said, "I feel present." And he said, "Now relax." And I said, "Master, that's it?" And he's like, "Yeah." Totally went over my head. Didn't understand what happened until 7 years passed. But the point that he made, that it really just comes down to presence and relaxation, or noticing and uh, letting go. Relaxation, letting go, relaxation, letting go, and noticing, being aware, being present. Um, that's it. Whatever practice it is that you're doing, or whatever particular experiment I'm giving you, or whatever it is you're exploring, fundamentally, none of them are outside the present. None of them are outside reality. None of them are outside experience, because that's all that there is. And all of them foster letting go. Really, that's yeah. I mean, if there's one thing that encapsulates the whole path, it's just silence, just me not saying anything. But if I'm going to use words, and I'm going to move from the absolute to the relative, so now we're in time, letting go, right? Letting go. Letting go is how you arrive at this timeless nature, this ever unfolding. And then past that, to the point where there's no sense that anything is unfolding, and all ings and ings, all verbs, are just thrown out the window. So, but there are gates, there are reasons. There's a reason the Buddha taught 40 methods. There's a reason spiritual teachers and systems offer different approaches. It's because not the same thing works for everybody. Yeah, but when you can find what works for you, what opens the most emptying, what opens the most freedom, what opens the most presence, what opens the most release, when you find that thing, you do more of it. These awakening glimpses occur. You rest in them, you bask in them, you direct, you orient yourself at those glimpses. And you do this consistently over time, and you meditate every day. You really begin to see, oh yeah, it's always been reality. It's always been this. It's always been here. It's always been now. Whatever it is we want to attribute or call it. And as a result of the practice and the noticing, that the disidentification, which is the basis for freedom, occurs. It's very difficult. I really don't think I would have got, like I've said in interviews, there's no causality between all the meditation I did and the awakening, right? I've said that because it's not that necessarily thousands of hours of meditation produces awakening. Like, nothing produces reality, okay? No meditation techniques produce reality. No amount of books you read produces reality. But to get to this realization of unproduction, of non-production, of non-arising, at least in my case, took a specific and sufficient amount of disidentification, of release. And that happened through meditation, in my case. Other people, they're different, right? But for other people, if it happened by chance, that's not reliable to me. That's not anything I can look at in terms of methodology. You know, they just got off a bus and suddenly they became the universe. Fantastic. Now they give good. Now they give really great Dharma teachings, but it doesn't mean anything for the rest of us. Yeah, it's really only the movement through stages and a process that a person has gone through that is useful for everyone else. Yeah, in terms of what to practice. Of course, once the teacher has entered that state, they're transmitting it. It's coming off of them, and that in of itself is the resonance coming from the teacher is often enough to trigger an awakening in that person's presence or at another point in time. So that's a thing, So it doesn't mean I'm not trying to write them off. I'm just saying, in terms of what we can do, what can be done for the teachers that this just popped off for them. You just sit in their presence and receive their darshan and listen to their talks, and it may work or it may not. But in terms of uh, for those people that it wasn't like this automatic grace that they just received one day, methodology is important. So let me see if I can take a couple questions and then go from there. It's already midnight, so I'm staying up for all of you. Yeah, Nicola said lots of thinking also plays a role in protections from feelings. 100%. 100%. David says, Course in Miracles teaches the ego is suspicious of truth at best and vicious at its worst. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and then Maggie clarified Suzanne Segal, she had actually done a ton of mantra meditation um, before she stepped off that bus. Yeah. Okay, so okay, let's do one question. Let's do one. Yeah, yeah.
Just ask your question about that, because that comes up a lot, and I've asked about sort of the immediate awakening versus practice. Though from a non-dual point of view, like Jim Newman would say, I mean, just in terms of practice, it's kind of irrelevant. It is sort of reflecting on it in the relative. So
it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant for him. It's irrelevant for him. So it can only be said it's irrelevant for for a person that's actually in this recognition. Like for Jim Newman, for example, I since he's a spiritual teacher and he's talks about this with quite a degree of depth and precision. He probably doesn't have a lot of internal dialogue and narrative that causes him suffering. His mind's probably pretty quiet, right? So for him, who like probably doesn't even talk to himself, right? Like, of course, methods are irrelevant. There's another teacher, Gary Weber or whatever. Yeah, Gary Weber. Apparently, he did a backbend and then his internal commentary just stopped permanently. Yeah, or he did. They did some studies on his brain. Default mode network was permanently shut down. Not that that necessarily means anything, but the fact that it's tied to his subjective experience of just an absence of commentary. Yeah, of course, methods are relevant for a person who's absent of internal commentary, for sure. When for Jim or anyone who's established as reality, right? Methods are irrelevant, totally irrelevant. But for the people mired in their narratives and mired in craving and mired in duality, to just tell them to not do anything doesn't always work. I mean, it often doesn't work. I mean, this is why your teacher Stephen Snyder teaches the jhanas. It's why he has a process. Like on his retreats with Tina, he used to lead people. So like they started to do these jhana dzogchen hybrids. So what they would do is they would have people go through the jhanas, or they would develop access concentration. So they'd get pretty still the first 7 days, and then they could choose either to progress with the concentration to jhana, or they could just switch to Dzogchen and then just start to rest in natural awareness. So at the seventh day, they would either do jhana or they would get the pointing out instructions. So they needed a degree of stillness first, in their opinion, right? In order to have that recognition be stable, and then to abide in that recognition for the duration of the retreat. And once the abiding in that recognition becomes natural and specific insights occur, like, oh, I am this nature, that's a big one. When that happens, practices are irrelevant. But for the person that's like thinking negative thoughts all the time, you know, causing all kinds of problems for themselves and uh, for other people and whatever. For me to just tell that person, hey, dude, your reality, do nothing. Like, what does that do? You know, like, oh, yeah, your suffering's fine, man. Like, it's not actually suffering. There's not really a you there that's suffering. You just think that there is, and then the guy just looks at you like, dude, that doesn't help at all. Like, even if it's true, it literally does nothing for my condition. So yeah, so this is the thing. Yeah.
Just as a point, I mean, I hear you, and I think, but that misses the, like in Tibetan practice, the view, use thought to liberate yourself from thought. So there's this understanding that, and look, I've pushed Jim Newman on this, and, coming from a philosophy background, I can follow the intricacies of the thought, and I could see where it would be totally useless for a different, again, karmic conditioning, the causes and conditions. But
yeah,
as a view, I mean, and what he's doing, it's like Dzogchen practice. He is, I mean, if you could stay with the thought and you follow him and you track him in terms of where he's leading you down, like you've said this, off of a cliff, where thought no longer can be referred to as that, but this. I mean, it's for me, when I stay with him and I follow him, it's like my mind wants to explode because I am a thinker. And it's like if I'm, so just to be fair to, I think, that kind of pointing out instruction, now it's dangerous because, like you said, I've needed to do meditation practice. So I want to ask you a question about Stephen Schneider, because I've asked this to him a number of times about jhana versus open awareness. It's like I'm doing the Brahma Viharas with him. I'm dropping into sort of an absolute. He says, that's kind of the practice to get to not leave the relative. I mean, because it's not like I'm leaving the relative per se, but to experience mind in that more absolute way. So my question is if somebody says to you, do I pursue the jhanas or do I pursue open awareness? I mean, I guess I'm answering my question. It depends on the person.
Yeah.
So I'm doing both practices, Dzogchen, and I'm doing Stephen Schneider's as well as Zen.
Yeah. And
I'm not at a crossroads, but I'm like, I'm digging a lot of holes. You know that about me, and I can dig a lot of holes. But they're all, I mean, truly, they are all helping me. They're all unifying my mind in such a way that.
Yeah.
So
well,
if somebody were to say to you, okay, I'm at this point, do I drop into jhana, or do I still stay with open awareness, Rigpa, Chakra? What would...
Well,
I mean, I'm asking you as a transference to teach me, to show me, to, in some sense, point out, which I understand the nature of what I'm doing, and it's a projection as somehow.
Yeah. That's all good. I'm saying so for you, like this particular question, if someone else asked me like, hey, should I pursue the jhanas or Zen, like it's different. But for you, because I know you and I've taught you for many years now, and we're very close. I know the intricacies of this, right? Like you're at the point where you just need to stop. like just stop. like it's not at this point. It's not even about the practices. It's not even about a goal. You've already had the recognition of awareness. You already have the recognition of rigpa. You already have the sense of immediacy. That's all that is needed, because that's all that there is. So because that recognition has dawned, and for anyone else here, this is also the case. If that recognition has dawned, you nurture and mature that recognition to the point where you do not feel any conflict with methods, because you know that methods do not remove you from reality. Like, I do jhanas and cessation like going to freaking Disneyland. Like, it doesn't mean anything to me, you know? So, but when you take, different practices, and you create this edifice of like goals and things, directions that you're attempting to take your practice in, like, that's useful up to a certain point. That's useful to get you momentum to allow the recognition to dawn. But once the recognition has dawned, and you just keep looping in this, you're actually like, you're not addressing the clinging. That's the thing. Like, when I tell you just stop, is because all of this like perpetual trying so many things, it's rooted in clinging. So if you just drop the clinging and you just stop, you just stare at a freaking wall for an hour a day, work with your feelings, that will be very fruitful. But it's hard to stop, right? Like, this is the thing. Like, I don't want to stop. This is the only thing I have to hold on to. Well, that's what it is. You will continuously get asked to let go of what you want to hold on to. Sorry, you've decided on enlightenment. Uh, this is what happens. You know. So yeah, like, the thing with the jhanas too, and the special states, it should be considered that those are special states. Like, even Tina has said that for her to go into the jhanas, she has to go into a retreat, right? So Snyder's jhanas are very deep. So it may be useful. Yeah, if you're committed to that, do whatever he says. Like, don't listen to me. But my view on it, what's best, what would be useful for you as a practitioner, is to just stop, just let it go. You know, if the
Any ideas?
if the final thread for you or for anyone listening is spirituality, if the final thread is attainments, you can either go and attain them, or you can drop it. Either way, it will be good, you know? Either way, it'll be okay. So
for me, it's not attainments. I think you're right. I am so afraid of letting go of the one tether that I have to fixing whatever. My ego does not want to let that go, because it's the one thing that
that you've got.
Me to feel, safe, guarded. I mean, I understand this is an invention of my mind, but I am so fucking afraid.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the thing. Like, what is more important? Um, we could argue that, I mean, the thing that is obstructing the open awareness, and the thing that is obstructing the deepening of the realization, is the fear. The reason you can't jump off the cliff is the fear. So, I mean, fear more than jhanas should be your object of inquiry and meditation. Having, instead of doing body contemplation on uh, the feeling of your feet, or just a general awareness of the body, but to actually spend time every day looking at the fear, investigating the fear, getting in touch with the texture of the fear. I mean, I'm sure from a therapy lens, this is like dangerous stuff. You're like, oh, this is a way to re-traumatize someone. Like, you're a mature practitioner, put that aside, dive into the fire, go into the fear, make it your main thing. If you make it your main thing, if you make it your main priority, you will come out on the other side. Otherwise, the spiritual practices and the teachers and the lessons will just all it'll rob your time. Yeah. You're distracting yourself with things. Like, this is where you need to go. You need to go into the heart. You need to confront the fear. But the impulse is to always focus on external things. Yeah.
And then the thought that I will lose everything. Everything is in that. All these objects, reality, whatever. Yeah. I mean, again, I can put words to it. I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to die. I can put all these words to it.
Yeah.
I am terrified of that, and it's so existential. It's so in my DNA. It's cellular. I don't want to die. I mean, it's as simple and as frank as that. And I'm resisting it. And it's like you say, jump into the fire, and I'm like, fuck no.
Right. Yeah. So there are reasons to investigate the fear and to take it in a way that is palatable. Like, if it's not possible to jump in the fire, then you get closer to the fire, right? And gradually you get used to the heat. That's the only thing you can do. You're subject to otherwise a fire looms over your head and you're just, in some other place. But the best that you can do is to get closer to the fire and really make that a thing. If you're afraid of the disidentification and losing yourself and losing all of that, I mean, these are all warranted things to be afraid of in the process of awakening. Totally.
Well, and I could say, Lama Justin, Stephen said the same thing you did. Inch up, take it slow.
Yeah.
I think on some level, the psychoanalyst in me who repeats trauma in my life is why I probably, want to burn myself. I do plant medicine. I do tattoos. I put myself in these initiatory. And on the one hand, psychologically, I'm like, okay, I'm repeating something. But maybe like you've said in the past, it is a purification. It is a sort of, unification of all of this experience. I'm hoping it's not a story. Again, I hope I'm inching closer in my own sort of karmic way, more consciously rather than unconsciously just fucking burning myself and being like, oh, that's not pleasant. But again, like with relationships and other things, I hope I'm learning. I hope, and thank you for this, because this is, again, integrating,
yeah, of course,
moving something. So I appreciate it. Thank
you.
you.
Yeah. It's like the best that can be done. It's like if the cliff is too much, if the whole house burning is too much, then you just take as much of it as you can each day and feel into as much of it as you can, and gradually, I mean, yeah, in Steven's words, it's like a muscle. Your capacity to handle fear is a muscle, right? Like, to be honest with you, it may never go away, you know, until it may never go away until that moment dawns and you lose yourself in the universe, you know. But that's the whole thing. It may be God's will, the will of the universe, that you feel the fear and you leap anyways. It's a thing of faith. And I usually don't use the word faith. I'm not a kind of faith guy, right? But there is an element of trust involved in this process. And if you don't have trust to leap and to take that leap into, potentially losing yourself, losing your motivation, losing your conceptual mind, losing your identity, then you just get as close to it as you can, because that's where this is taking you. So yeah, it's an object of reflection to consider where this is taking you. Like, no matter what you do or no matter what you try, there's like this inescapable gravity to awakening to this black hole, you know? And that's a thing, as frightening as it is, that you can begin to trust. That it's like, yeah, you've done all these ceremonies and you actually haven't lost your mind. You're still David, you know? You've done like all this stuff, and you're still a psychotherapist. You're like, like, it's a thing to consider that everything that you've done up to this point has not actually produced the thing you're afraid of. So begin to trust that, like, the gravity of this thing is pulling you, in the. We don't know if it's the right direction or the wrong direction, but it's its own direction. That's for sure. Yeah. All right. Thanks, David. Let's see. Is there anyone else? Maggie asked if Jim Newman did a bunch of meditation, possibly. Um, and then Steven shared the Elmo cocaine with non-duality videos, which is just perfect. And Nicola said, first of all, the resistance has to be considered and held in love and welcomed. Yeah, 100%. 100%. All right, let's do one more question, and then we'll call it a night. Oh, nice to have you here, Margie, by the way. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Um, just recently, I have discovered that sometimes I can use anger to shut down the voice. It just sort of comes up from somewhere, and everything goes quiet for a while. But I don't know if I can sometimes even almost do it willfully once I notice, that it's happening and it won't stop. Then I can just, sort of. It feels like I gather force. I can gather a force and blow it up for a while. It always comes back. But I really, really appreciated the talk today because, I've heard it before. What you've said, but for some reason it really rang a bell today. But I just thought I'd mention that. I don't know if it's helpful or if it's anything I should continue to do, or if I'm just going to blow my head off one of these days. Yeah, that would be nice.
It's a really good comment, because in Dzogchen, for example, it's regarded that the the afflictions become the fuel for presence. So in the same way that the uninterrupted nature of the stream of thought can become a fuel for your presence, or fuel for presence and noticing, this is possible with any other immediate aspect of the experiential field. So negative or quote negative emotions, they have a kind of explosiveness in the field of experience. They have a kind of intensity where they literally they take up the entirety of your attention, and that's why they can be so powerful. So the Thai forest masters, the Thai forest masters Ajahn Mun and his disciples, one of their main practices was to go into jungles where there were tigers and to do walking meditation near the tigers. And sometimes they'd actually have like a confrontation with a tiger. But of course, they went to jungles where the humans were not hunted by the tigers, but there's still some chance you could die. you know? and Ajahn.
There's always that chance.
Yeah, exactly. But the point was that Ajahn Bua, who wrote Ajahn Mun's biography, I can't remember which master had said it specifically, but he said that when you look into the face of a tiger, there's never a moment where you're more aware than that one.
Yeah.
because the fear is so overwhelming, like your whole body explodes in fear, and he would say stories about like how like even the most senior like hardcore scholar monks whatever, when they came to the forest and they heard a tiger roar, they freaking ran. So it was really, but yeah, this is to illustrate the point on the intensity of some of these explosive um, emotions, right, or experiences. And if you can see them in that, if you can experience them that way, in the sense that you're just feeling into them and you're feeling the immediacy, that's how wisdom can emerge, or energy can actually unlock in your body, in your experience. But if you're using the anger to shut off thought, then the anger is still being directed at a goal. So you may be able to you see what I'm saying? You may be able to shut off thought for some time, but it comes back. But you'll notice that if you just really feel and listen to the anger itself is silent. And that would be a different gate. Because the issue with using anger to like shut down thought is it kind of reminds me of Return of the Jedi, when Luke finally faces the Sith, the Palpatine, the Sith Lord, and he's just like, feel your rage, strike me down with your anger, like like you don't want to keep striking thought down with your anger, because of where that may end up going, in like in a in a damaging or unwholesome way. Yeah, like you said, you could blow your head off or something. Yeah, yeah, because it's kind of because
I sort of thought that myself. So, but thanks.
yeah, because it's kind of, one way is feeling into it, and the other way is like using it as a pressure cooker. And like whenever you use a pressure cooker, you might blow a fuse or something. So yeah. So I don't want you to. I don't want. Yeah, I don't want you to blow any fuses, Bob. So just be kind to yourself. All right.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everyone. All right, everyone. So the next call, I mean the next class will be Wednesday at 6 p.m. PST, and then we'll meet again next Sunday. So for all of you that are open to it, please observe your thoughts for the next week. Just notice the thought stream, and then we'll talk about that during our next sit. So, all right, everyone. Great seeing all of you.
Thanks, Ryan. That was great.
See you. Thank you, everyone.